Hey everybody, Michael Snyder, Pacific Northwest Weather Watch. Today is February 12th, and right now we're looking at the visible satellite imagery with the shower activity still across Washington State. Should be wrapping up as we go through this afternoon and evening. Check out some of the mountain wave activity to the east of the Cascades of Washington and Oregon, showing how that atmosphere behaves as a fluid. Look at the clearing behind the system across BC too, exposing some of the nice snow-capped mountains out there. Next storm system up here is a beam, California. This will spread some moisture northward. Some decent mountain snows for the Cascades of Oregon and Washington, and even going to try to tease out a little bit of snowfall for some of the lower terrain. Temperatures are going to be very marginal. We might be targeting some areas more than others, maybe like the Kitsap Peninsula. Can have an east flow, maybe a little cold air banking up against the mountains there. And if we get enough moisture off to the east here, we could get some snow into eastern Oregon and Washington for some of the lower elevations as well. We'll dive into that as we go through the video this morning. Tuesday through Tuesday night, we start this offshore flow. You can see it coming down the Okanagan River Gap there, gusting up towards 40 miles per hour. Some offshore winds here. You can kind of see the northeast component there, and some chilly wind chills there with some of that windy activity and some of that cooler Arctic air trying to filter down into the Pacific Northwest. Back this up, there's our storm system off the coast of California, and you can see we've got the squirrely winds and kind of that little weak low pressure center over Washington State for now. Then we turn things offshore as we go through tomorrow morning. You can see the gusty winds coming down across British Columbia, out of the northeast, Stampede Gap, Columbia River Gorge, Okanagan River Valley. You can kind of see the offshore component there as this low pressure moves up the Oregon coastline. Look at these easterlies coming all the way out over the ocean. The problem is the source of this cold air is just not that cold here, so it's going to be really tough and a very marginal setup here for some snowfall. But you can see that low pressure center eventually kind of meander and taking its time going northward here. So it's going to keep things offshore. You could keep some of the snow levels a little bit lower here as we go on into Thursday. And then we're probably going to warm up here as we head on towards the weekend, at least a bit, even though we've got some of that offshore flow. The cold air behind BC and eastern Washington, Oregon is just not that cold at this point. Now take a look at temperatures this week. You can see where the really cold air is going here off to the east of the Rockies. Mainly, you can see Montana. Look at Dillon, Bozeman below zero. Helena down to 3. Yellowstone into the single digits here as the Arctic air stays mostly off to the east. And if you want a nice, affordable home weather station to record all this crazy weather we get here in the Pacific Northwest, click on that link down below to save 10% off. Highly recommend this station. It builds its own forecast. And this is a smartphone app. It updates every 3 seconds. Stores the data for you in the cloud. Check it out. Now, looking at the dew point here on the most recent European, I waited for this model run to come out here, and you'll clearly see this cooler air start to drop down across British Columbia. And the reason why I'm showing you a dew point, it kind of shows you the characteristics of the Arctic air mass probably the best versus just looking at basic surface temperature maps. So you can kind of see that Arctic air or modified Arctic air kind of moving out here in the easterlies across some of Washington. You can see the dew points dropping down into the 20s here for many areas, into the teens for southwest BC. The question is, how far is this moisture going to get north? And you know, it's very marginal as well. So the temperatures are going to be a problem. It might snow and even accumulate for a few areas here once precipitation is occurring. But once it stops, it's probably going to really go back up above freezing and probably melt. We're not looking at widespread ice over the roadways or anything like that. But you can see kind of that chilly air mass across British Columbia here. And again, the easterlies with the low pressure spinning off the Oregon coastline here with the warmer temperatures off the coast. And again, then that low pressure system meanders north, and then we should start to warm up as we go towards the weekend. You can kind of see as we go on into Saturday, that cooler air is pushing off to the east at that point. Now, looking at the European, the 12Z run, this is what's going on today. We're wrapping up some of the shower activity. Still could be some light snow going across the Cascades. Pushes off to the east. Then we wait for the next bulk of moisture to come out of the south. There it is for the Oregon Cascades, Washington Cascades. Shows a little bit of that snow mixing in here. Again, maybe some brief accumulations into the lower terrain. But you can see across Kitsap Peninsula, this is actually lower terrain as well. We got the easterlies banking up against the Olympic Mountains here. You could prolong some of that precipitation here in the form of snowfall and drop a few inches even. And again, if we can get a nice slug of moisture in eastern Washington, it could be cold enough out there to pick up a few inches for the Tri-Cities, Yakima, maybe Ellensburg, and even towards Spokane as well. But then as you go on in towards Thursday night into Friday morning, then we get another system riding up here as we go on into the day Saturday. You can see it's not progging any kind of snowfall against southwest BC, western Washington, maybe some for the higher terrain of the Cascades, Washington, Oregon at that point. So looking at accumulated positive snow depth in inches. Let's watch this come up from the south there, and you can see that snow, Oregon, Washington, Cascades, and it's trying to paint a little bit of accumulation for this lower elevations. It would be a very slushy mess here. Again, we're not expecting ice on the roadways or anything like that, but look at the Kitsap Peninsula, picking up maybe 3 inches there. That's much more of a significant snowfall. Could affect portions of Highway 101 down towards Shelton at times also, and it does show some as we go through Friday, some of that trying to get into eastern Washington as well. Not a lot here, but it will be colder out there in eastern Oregon as well. So yeah, even just an inch or two can make things quite slick. Looking at 850 millibars, I want to just kind of show you the evolution of this Arctic air mass. And you can see the ridge building here. The north flow tries to leak out some of that cooler air into BC. It's just not that cold. We don't have a lot to work with here. Things are going to have to line up just right as you see the bulk of that cold air kind of hanging off to the eastern, the Rocky Mountains. And by the time we go through Friday, you can see things warming up aloft really well. And we just don't have that Arctic air hanging out here as we go through the weekend. Now, let's take a look here at the GFS, the extended. So here goes our little swing, the little Arctic air mass. That polar lobe takes a brief pass at us there. The ridge kind of hangs out, and the storm track gets shunted into California here as we go through the weekend. And then another interesting system will dive out of the northwest, and this could hit some of Oregon, maybe spring some precip back up over the top of us here across the Washington Cascades as well, but will mainly target the southwest USA at that point. Now, taking a look at 700 millibars, I just want to kind of show you the meager pass that this polar lobe makes at us. It just kind of swings a bit of cold air into British Columbia and it hangs out for a bit, and then it's just on its way. You can see that polar lobe move across, Hudson Bay out there and out towards the Great Lakes and whatnot. And then we warm up aloft here across the Pacific Northwest. Here's looking at total precipitation in inches. So we're going to put this into motion, and this is the first wave. You can see it does bring some precip up towards Seattle, a little bit up towards Everett here as well, but kind of targeting better Oregon and California. Some of the coastal areas don't do too bad. Then that system's going to come down kind of out of the northwest. And this one, again, is probably going to target Oregon and California better. But look at this. We're looking at almost 10 days out now, and you're still looking at Seattle only just around 1/4 of an inch here. You can see kind of not much across the northern Puget Sound or southwest BC. More for the coastal areas and down towards Oregon and California, however. But yeah, not great signs here for precipitation through the extended forecast for a lot of Washington and southwest BC. Now, looking at total snow in inches on the national blended models, let's scroll through here and you'll see it coming up from the south. Again, the Kitsap Peninsula, it paints a couple inches there, and it shows a little bit of snow trying to get into eastern Washington, Oregon as well. And hopefully this can overperform and really bring some nice snowfall to the higher terrain of the Cascades as well. So looking at also at avalanche danger, check this before you go out if you're going off into the high country. Still some considerable and some moderate danger out there as well. Looks like it dropped that high there for West Yellowstone, just having it considerable for today. But check this out. All kinds of good information on that on avalanche.org. Percent of average precipitation since the water year started. Again, kind of the mixed bag here. Some places of western Washington below. There's some areas above. Idaho and Montana, western portions of Montana, not doing too hot there as well. But we'll watch that as we go. And this is the average temperature departure from average. If I put that update February 11th, the latest, and you can see even with that Arctic outbreak, we are still above average here over the last 60 days. So pretty interesting. There is a few areas there that are slightly below. For the most part, we are still above average, kind of typical El Nino stuff. And this goes all the way back towards October 1st, and clearly the West, much of it above average in that time frame. Drought monitor still looking good right now. It just caused a little bit of concern here because we are still running that long-term deficit here. And if we start to dry things out, we might start to introduce a little bit more drought. But we'll worry about that later. We have plenty of time to look at that, especially with this very marginal snow event upcoming here. You might start to see some of the chatter about that, or you might have already seen it on some social media. Right now, not expecting any widespread snowstorm, no widespread ice on the roadways. But if you get 3 or 4 inches there in the Kitsap Peninsula out there, that can cause some travel disruptions, Highway 101. And you always can't rule out some of that precip getting a bit further north into some of that cooler air. And, accumulations could be had at times, especially maybe Seattle towards Everett and up towards southwest BC and maybe some of the San Juans also. And, of course, eastern Washington, Oregon will be a little bit colder. So, anyway, hope you guys are having a good day. Click like and subscribe. We'll do this again tomorrow, and I will talk to you guys then.